fourth consecutive month of a fall in employment and is worrisome since just in April and May, India lost 25 million non-farm jobs, an indication of the pain in the informal economy. While the second wave has hurt economic activity across the board, startups and small businesses were better equipped and implemented learnings, leveraged technology to survive and sustain their businesses, as per consulting and research firm Zinnov. SMBs across sectors have laid off employees as demand and sales were impacted. Hiring activity is expected to accelerate, albeit conservatively, once the economy reopens. Startups in sectors like e-commerce, health tech, ed tech, delivery, logistics, and of course fintech have been actively hiring due to the surge in demand. However, recovery of jobs in travel, hospitality, mobility, and many others is likely to take a while. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on Young Turks, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan. Joining me now to talk about the labour market, the opportunities and the challenges, Madan Padaki, the co-founder of Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, or GAME, Gayatri Vasudevan, the chairperson of LabourNet Services, and Gurpreet Singh, co-founder of Avigna. Appreciate you joining us here on the programme. Madan, let me come to you now and start by asking you about what you make of the impact on the labour market, on jobs, on account of the second wave. Unlike the previous lockdown, which was very harsh and a blunt instrument, this time, because of the various relaxations, especially for industrial clusters, it has not been as bad as we saw last year. What's been the impact on the job market?
Thank you, Shireen, for inviting me to be on this conversation. We at GAME have been tracking about 1,500 odd entrepreneurs across the length and breadth of the country. Well, of course, there was shock last year from the lockdown, and how do you cope with that? I would say that from our conversations with entrepreneurs, the impact, well, it has not been that shocking, it has been fairly brutal. You know, a large percentage of our entrepreneurs, the small businesses that we work with, struggle to find ways to make both ends meet, struggle to find customers, to get footfalls in their stores, are dipping into savings heavily, and of course are struggling to find loans in the market. I would say that the uncertainty that is looming over their businesses at this point of time is probably higher than what it was last year, though they have found coping mechanisms that has worked for them last year and applying it to this year. But our assessment is that it is definitely bad, if not worse.
Okay, let me just understand from you. You're saying that it's not as shocking because what we saw happen last time with the national lockdown was the fact that it was literally overnight in a few hours and it was across the board. But you're saying that this time around the impact is as brutal, if not more. Now, you know, what is the uncertainty most about? Because what we are seeing at this point in time, our states are now getting back into some sort of unlock, some sort of calibrated, phased reopening. So what are they most concerned about? We've also got the vaccination drive underway, albeit on a, you know, snail's pace in comparison to what is required at this point in time. So what are they most concerned about from an outlook perspective?
So in my conversations with various entrepreneurs, Shireen, the uncertainty is about whatever we're calling it as wave 2, wave 3. When will this end? Will cases continue to spike after the unlock? If so, when will vaccination get over? So I think the duration, in which we will see normalcy come back, whether it's going to be 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and therefore, as entrepreneurs, what should we be planning for and how long? Is the uncertainty. So how long do I need to survive this phase and with its many waves? I think that is creating a lot of uncertainty in the minds of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that I would imagine. And, you know, there's just no way of being able to second guess that till you actually start to see a reopening. And whether that reopening is then sustainable, I think that's the larger issue. Gayatri, thanks very much for joining us. I want to understand from you, you know, when we talk about the impact of jobs at LabourNet, what's the data telling you in terms of hiring? Which are the sectors that are most impacted? Which are the sectors where you believe there are opportunities and, in fact, net hiring?
So thanks first for inviting me in, Shireen. We're seeing enormous hiring in the health sector. So hospitals, intermediaries, you're seeing a lot of hiring. For example, there is a At any point of time, you have at least 10,000 vacancies across hospitals in major cities, open vacancies which are coming in. If you look at logistics, there's a lot of hiring which is going on. And when I look at healthcare sector, you're looking at vaccinators, nurses, ward boys, help desks. The range, other than the medical staff alone, I'm not even talking of the doctors and nurses, doctors and above layers, I'm talking of the allied. So there's a requirement for radiologists and others.
Yeah.
Logistics is really booming. So I think these are the sectors where I see enormous hiring happening.
You talked about the shortages that we're seeing in the healthcare sector, and that's where there's been an exponential surge in demand, as well as the logistics sector, purely because e-commerce has taken off in such a big way on account of all the restrictions in the lockdown. But, are these vacancies being filled? Is there enough talent available? Are people being reskilled, upskilled to be able to make use of these opportunities, Gayatri? What's the challenge there?
So, Shireen, I think that's where we've not focused. The healthcare, in my mind, can be quickly reskilled to, serve the shortage now. For example, we have two voluntary layers, the ASHA and the ANM, and there are about 10 lakh ASHAs and 2 lakh ANMs. So if we are able to reskill them immediately, we should be able to actually cater to a lot of shortages. And this is a voluntary layer, which I think is a crime in this period of time. Lab technicians, I think we should be able to quickly look at upskilling and take it. We have 5 lakh pharmacies. Most of them are seeing as shops, but they're owned by somebody has a pharmacy degree there. So these are places we need to quickly look at reskilling and putting them out there. There's a lot of, as you said, e-commerce and therefore logistics, even in the medical sector, there's a whole supply chain around it. So the supply chain, if it is really, able to really fix it, I think we'll really get far. I think those are the areas where you're going to see hiring. Other areas where you're going to see losses.
Yes, so let me just take our viewers through what LabourNet is projecting. New job creation by 2022, road freight 18 lakh, warehouses between 1.2 to 1.5 lakh, courier services 60,000, packaging 40,000. Gurpreet, when you hear those numbers, what are you seeing on your platform? We were talking about being able to reskill, upskill to ensure that people can actually benefit and avail of the opportunities that are opening up. What are you seeing on this front?
Thanks for having me, Shireen, here. So, Shireen, due to the lockdown restrictions on field-driven non-essential work, we actually saw 30% of active workforce had to stop their existing work. So what we did that we were able to accommodate about 2/3 of this workforce in alternative opportunities, which is primarily remotely driven tasks as well as essential last mile offerings. Okay. Now, these are the sectors which are currently booming, including the healthcare sector, as Gayatri pointed out. So now, in order to pull this off, there were multiple problem statements that we have to take care of. Firstly, we identified which unemployed workers could be mapped to alternative opportunities. So here, the parameters that had to be considered were demand availability, earning potential, similar skill sets, among others, right? For example, a person who's doing an audit, who does a complex audit, can be accommodated into remote proctoring or telecalling opportunities easily. Thus, what we did was that we were able to make a new gig available to affected worker within 24 hours of them losing one. So I think that's what we did at our end, Shireen.
Well, that's interesting. You're saying that the turnaround time could have actually been as short as 24 hours. But, take me through where you've been able to place people. You gave us some examples. How many jobs were you able to find during the course of this pandemic, whether it's the first wave and now, of course, the second wave? How many people were you able to deploy in terms of being able to find alternative gigs for them?
Sure, Shireen. So in this past 1 year, Shireen, we identified multiple market opportunities which became relevant due to the pandemic, right? One of the very promising sectors that we have identified is healthcare. The pandemic has led to immense increase in the workload of various pillars in this healthcare sector. And, we are working in adding value to each such pillar. So we have started working with diagnostic centers. We have started working with COVID relief organizations. And in the last 2 weeks itself, we were able to deploy about 1,000 gig workers within functions of calling support, data management, test sample logistics, and other such requirements as well. Now, this number of 1,000 gig workers is going to increase to 10,000 in the coming weeks. So that is where, we have a full confidence that healthcare will be a booming sector. Now, apart from healthcare, Shireen, we have also launched a new business line called Avigna Expert, where the focus is to solve high-skilled requirements of enterprises across roles of data science, technology, marketing, human resources, and finance. Now, this has led to a surge in demand for gig workers who are higher skilled as well. And the last important sector that we have identified is where the large enterprises have seen a tailwind toward gig economy. They are trying to variabilize their costs, they're trying to hedge their risks, and gig economy and Avigna is standing at the forefront to solve this problem for them.
So in your assessment, I'm looking at some data. So according to your Jobs Outlook report, large firms are turning 15% of their permanent jobs to gig workers?
Exactly. So as I said, Shireen, today the large enterprises are doing, making their gig transformation strategies. And the target is that they will shift up to 15% of these existing roles to gig. Avigna is actually helping them in their gig transformation strategies, and even industries, the traditional industries like manufacturing, banking, are part of this wave towards the gig economy. Further, we have also seen that roles which were primarily driven through permanent resources like content, like telecalling, like exam proctoring, has also shifted to gig. So these are some of the large requirements which gig economy will take up, Shireen.
Well, that's interesting. But Mohan, I want to come back to, when you launched GAME, your mission was to be able to create 50 million new jobs by 2030. Now, where does what's happened over the past year and a half leave that target? And more importantly, with your partners, corporate partners, as well as the state governments that you're working with, how do you ensure that some of the challenges that we've spoken of are in fact being addressed on the ground?
Shireen, I think the mission is very much, in fact, has got accelerated due to the situation in a way, right? It's brought in the urgency that we need to look at creating far more sustainable models of job creation, and entrepreneurship probably is one of the bullets that we need to take and really work on that. So there are three elements that we're working on. How do you really build entrepreneurial mindsets and skills amongst schools, colleges, and so that when they're getting into the workforce, they're not coming out looking for a job, but we are able to see much more enterprises bloom. The second is that we're working directly with entrepreneurs. We run growth raters in Punjab and Karnataka, where we are trying to learn from entrepreneurs on what makes them to grow fast. And we are seeing phenomenal success stories of entrepreneurs growing their businesses, by 30–40% just in a span of 2–3 months by looking at what are the strategies around cash, customers, and capacity building. And the third area that we're working on is at a policy level, where we work with various state governments to figure out how do you make the life of these entrepreneurs easy from a perspective of access to finance, from a perspective of ease of doing business, and from a perspective of building a much more vibrant, empathetic ecosystem that looks at entrepreneurs first and then figures out how do I support it. So our call to action has seen a lot more people coming to us and partnering with us saying, yes, I think this needs to be done and now is the time. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think if we get all these moving elements right, we will be able to galvanize a very, very vibrant ecosystem that supports these small businesses to grow and thrive in better times. Of course, now there are survival strategies that they need to worry about, but this too shall pass.
Well, that is certainly the hope. This too shall pass. But Gayatri, I want to come back to you now and address the similar issue that I was talking to Madan about. And, you're working with different partners from Unilever, ITC, Godrej, the Tatas. And you're now your reach is across 21 states at this point in time. What are your partners telling you in terms of what's changing? How are they approaching the labor market differently? How are they approaching hiring differently today?
So I think the hiring in full-time positions in manufacturing is still quite on. I don't think there is still, at least in the, I would say in the supply chain, for their OEMs, etc., there is still a requirement. Like, for example, all truckers, there continues to be a shortage for truckers. Welders, fitters, helpers, I think there are still shortage there. Construction companies, there is a problem with people moving from one place to the other, but I think in terms of hiring, we're seeing hiring yet. I think where hiring is going down is beauty as a sector, for example, is completely down. I believe domestic work as a sector will go down. So anything which is related to large companies and their value chains, I think still hiring is going on. Automotive, you're seeing stops and starts. E-commerce, of course, is a big hiring. We're focusing on two elements. One is in the full-time job market. The second is in the temporary one, right? Somebody has 2 months to 3 months. Immediately look at skilling, reskilling, put them into jobs. And the third is in the entrepreneurship segment, which is a lot more complex, like Madan said. It's a lot more complex. For example, if I'm taking painter contractors, or mason contractors, I think it's complex. Small beauty shops, complex. Here is where the maximum losses are happening. Auto service is completely wiped out. Those are the sectors which are really struggling.
Yes, those are the sectors that are struggling because you've seen these lockdowns. And of course, most contact-based services have seen a big hit on account of COVID-19. But Gayatri, I want to go back to the point that you made on the three sort of tiers that you're working on: full-time employment, temporary, as well as entrepreneurship. On the temporary side, where are you seeing the big uptick at this point in time? And I want to understand from you, why do you believe that we're seeing such a shortage for truckers? Because that's something that the trucking industry has also been raising as a cause of concern. Why do you believe specifically that is seeing such a sort of aversion almost?
See, it was always an industry with shortage. Because of the whole stigma around the whole truckers, they move from place to place. And COVID, I think, made it worse because there was this entire sort of myth which was there that they are the ones who are bringing disease in. So they couldn't even have food at toll gates, and villages shut down to them. So I think the trucking industry has been very, very badly hit. I would say transport as such has been very badly hit. I see buses, there are no buses between villages to the tehsil or the taluk headquarters. So vehicles as such, the entire transport industry is hit, and trucking is the worst, I would say. Temporary hiring is at this point happening heavily in the healthcare sector. So they need vaccinators, like just as I was coming in, I got a call saying, give me 20 teams of vaccinators, teams of 6 within the next few hours. So you're seeing that kind of immediate demand which is required. And these demands, contrary to our belief, is not just the vaccinator. There's a lot of support staff which is required. So I think there are opportunities, but you have to look for it and quickly pivot. I also feel the state systems need to plan better, because all this is happening in the private sector. But as far as the services to the poor are concerned, if we plan better, I'm sure there'll be jobs.
Yes, and you need to align the demand and supply side. Very often we don't do that effectively. But Gurpreet, I want to come back to you. As Gayatri was pointing out, and that's something that you mentioned as well, that healthcare is the one specific area where you are seeing job creation like never before, whether it's vaccinators or ward boys or teleconsultation. I mean, it's all up in the air at this point in time, looking for takers. Where else are you seeing significant demand at this point in time, Gurpreet?
Sure, Shireen. So, Shireen, as I mentioned that some of the remotely driven verticals like exam proctoring, telecalling, content have taken a front seat in the gig economy because remote work has become the new norm across industries. So as we speak, more and more functions will follow, and we will, witness more and more adoption of gig. The second important trend that we see is that, as I mentioned, large enterprises are looking to variabilize their costs. They are trying to hedge their risks, and they are enforcing gig transformation strategies as of now. And by 2020, I see 50% of those roles being converted to gig, and I'm very confident about it. The one other point that I want to make out here, along with healthcare, as Gayatri mentioned, Kirana tech and ed tech have also gained a lot post the pandemic. And this trend will continue in the remaining months to come in the 20,000, 21, 22, trajectory as well. So overall, gig economy has gained due to the pandemic. New doors have opened up. And in general, the gig economy and Avigna is looking to uncover more such opportunities and alleviate the problems of underemployment, unemployment, lack of skills in India. We, as Avigna, want to create meaningful opportunities for the next 1 million gig workers in the next 1 year itself.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck with that aspiration, Gurpreet. And we do hope that policymakers, as well as corporate India, is listening to what Madan, Gayatri and Gurpreet are telling us. There are radical shifts in the labour market. Perhaps many of the jobs of the past are going to be redundant, and we're looking at creating a new set of jobs altogether. There is opportunity, but we need to be mindful of the skill requirement and ensure that the talent is actually catering to what the needs of the market are. Madan, Gayatri and Gurpreet, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on this special edition of Young Turks as we decode the labour market. We will wrap things up here. Stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up right after the break.